Hey folks, Dave here, and today I want to bring you guys my honest first impressions of the Fallout 76 beta here on PC. This is a title that I had greatly anticipated. Last month I posted a video entitled just basically, hey, I think we should give Fallout 76 a chance. Just because I think a lot of people were writing it off kind of early, especially as that was before we had seen any kind of real gameplay whatsoever. I want to make it clear up front that that's still my stance. I still want to give Fallout 76 a real chance to impress me, but the first impressions have not been great, even outside of the more expected technical issues for an early beta. Although, can you call this an early beta, seeing the game is launching in less than 2 weeks now, I think? Regardless, I'm going to work through some of my thoughts and first impressions here for you guys, having played about 3 hours of the PC beta last night. This footage is going to be all at 1440p, so if you haven't got any high-res footage of the game just yet, I would suggest that you crank that up on the YouTube player so you can see the details here, and the graphics are set to ultra, and this is also going to be a 60 FPS video as well. I'm going to start things off by covering the multiplayer features, because that's one thing that Bethesda is really trying that's new in this game, and it's also one of the main areas that people are really worried about. And I can now confirm for myself at least that some of those fears definitely are warranted. The multiplayer elements of the game, especially right at the vault at the start, are not great. Here on PC at least, everyone's microphones were locked wide open, broadcasting the entire time, and as you guys might expect, most people didn't realize that they were actually broadcasting because you start the game in first person and you can't see the small speaker icon over your head if your mic is broadcasting. I don't think my capture was working at the time, but my initial character creation took place with someone in the next room in the vault next to me having some kind of argument with their mom or something. It was hilarious. I'm trying to, get my beard looking right and adjust my character a bit before I go out and explore this new Fallout game. And in the background, I just hear someone going, "No, Mom, it's working now. I'm trying to play." It was the most hilarious stereotype of an open mic argument that I've ever heard. I was dying laughing. That's not quite the Fallout experience that people are looking for when they're hopping into the game for the first time, I don't think. The always-on area broadcasting microphones would continue to be a massive distraction throughout the entire time that I was trying to figure out the game's initial story here at the Vault. Other players were just a constant annoyance and distraction, and not an enjoyable addition to the game whatsoever, at least in the Vault areas. This is also made worse by the fact that, by default, player footsteps are turned up super loud. I imagine that's so that people can't sneak up and murder you. But again, when you're in the vault and you're trying to listen to the Mr. Handies and go through all of this carefully prepared set piece of Reclamation Day and leaving Vault 76 for the first time, you're hearing that background microphone noise and then just constant pitter-patter of footstep sounds everywhere. Thankfully, I checked, and Bethesda has already added a footstep sound volume slider just for those footsteps in the game's options. So I would suggest that you guys turn that down as quickly as possible because those footsteps are very distracting. After leaving Vault 76 for the first time, I finally had my first player contact where people were actually, talking on purpose. And nothing against the guys that I met outside the vault, but again, it just felt like a distraction. Everybody was super friendly, but everyone has their own individual play style. And when you're playing with random people, everyone tends to just do their own thing while talking back and forth.
There's another guy out here. RangerDave.
Hey, how's it going?
What's going on, bud?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, man, I hear you.
Nice. There's a gun on this guy right here.
Oh shit. Sheesh. You shut up. Check my inventory here. Oh, here we go. Oh, these fucking robots. Hey buddy, have you found a bat out here or anything?
Nah, I just walked out the vault. Haven't seen much yet.
Hey Randy, where's your percent at, bro? You're still at 66%? Oh my god, bro, you ain't playing this.
To reiterate though, these are just the first vault encounters, and everyone's kind of crowded together in the same area. So encounters with players out in the wasteland of West Virginia, that might play out differently. It might be more interesting. But here at the Vault, everyone's just talking about, oh man, have you found this? Have you seen this? Hey, where can I find a weapon? Hey, how do I change this setting? And again, when I'm trying to focus on, hey, what's the story here? What's going on? It's just really distracting. Basically, as quickly as possible, I tried to find a couple of weapons, loot a few things, and then head out on my own. I really had no desire to have more than just a brief encounter with anybody else. I was planning to meet up with Joel at some point, and I just wanted to go out and do my own thing. Before I cover some of my exploring on my own and some of the story elements in the game, I want to kind of backtrack a bit, and let's talk about the technical issues here in the beta. I left this for a bit further into the video because I didn't want to lead off with technical problems, although they were very extreme, because this is very clearly labeled as a beta, and Bethesda said expect things to break. Well, I kind of expected things in-game to break, which they did occasionally. What I wasn't expecting was for my preload of the beta to delete itself an hour and a half before the beta was supposed to begin. I guess thankfully for me, I at least noticed this about an hour before the game was supposed to go live and was able to start my download, so I was only an hour late to the beta, but that took out an entire hour of playtime and testing. Even if you had a decently fast internet speed, once everyone started to download the beta over again all at the same time, Bethesda's servers got slammed pretty hard and the download speed slowed to a crawl. I almost didn't want to play anymore. It was just a really discouraging way to start things off and just left a bad taste in your mouth. It also took about 20 minutes to get the game running well enough to actually play. There were all kinds of problems with locking and unlocking full screen mode, being stuck in borderless windowed, being locked at 12 FPS randomly and having to restart the game a couple of times to get things going, which then required me to do my character creation all over again once the game was finally running to where I could play it. Once my character was created for a second time and the game was finally running well, I was excited to explore the vault for the first time, so I stood up from the bed, and the very first thing that I tried to interact with, the terminal on my desk, I got stuck in the enter terminal animation for, I think it was close to 3 solid minutes. I was worried that I was going to have to kill the game and restart it and do character creation for a third time. I was just laughing so hard that the very first thing I tried to interact with completely glitched out and I almost got stuck. But after about 3.5 minutes, I suddenly just zoomed over to the terminal and entered it and then was able to cancel and get back out. Just really, really odd stuff going on. Outside of all that though, the broken preload and the glitchiness of trying to interact with things right at the very start of the game and having to restart the character creation, the game as a whole ran pretty well. I seemed to have a locked frame rate of 72 FPS. There was a decent amount of hitching, but not too bad, and that's pretty much expected for a beta. I'm not too worried about some slight frame rate hitching when the game is not quite finished just yet. Okay, so multiplayer immersion breaking elements and technical issues aside, how does the gameplay play out? As I headed across Appalachia on my own, I definitely appreciated the bit of solitude that I finally got. But I think the lack of NPCs is going to be a weird point for me. Because again, the player encounters aren't that special, I don't think. The voice chat is more of a distraction, and the fact that you can see players on the map anyway, wherever they are, takes out any kind of suspense or surprise when running into other players. For example, in DayZ, because you never know where players might be, there was always a huge sense of tension and danger, and seeing another player in the distance was enough to get your heart racing. But here, there's no NPCs, and seeing a player off in the distance with their floating name and active mic just is, again, more of a distraction. Combat, though, works just fine. The Fallout series isn't known for spectacular combat, but I think it works okay here, and melee combat in particular is pretty satisfying. There was some slight server lag and delay during the combat, and occasionally you'd see an invisible enemy, or you'd hit an enemy and there would be an animation glitch where it would be desynced with your hit, but all that is pretty common beta stuff that I'm not too worried about. There are quite a lot of enemy spawns though, and some of the spawns end up right on top of you, which is incredibly annoying. And again, the combat, while fine, isn't anything groundbreaking, and I just don't think that constant combat is going to be a good replacement for NPCs and some more solid interactions with characters and elements in the world. The combat just isn't up to replacing all that. It does look like the VAT system has been tweaked just a bit and your gun does a better job now of following your targets, but I doubt I'm going to use it very often because a real-time VAT system to me is just a little bit annoying. It's okay if you're fighting groups of enemies, but I would have been fine if they had just removed it entirely. I don't really think I need it in the game. As I had talked about in my Give Fallout 76 a Chance video, my biggest pull for this game is the setting of West Virginia. And I think that having these swarms of enemies awkwardly spawning in around you is, again, more of a distraction than I want in a Fallout game. I don't need constant combat to be the carrot that is out in front of me to keep exploring. I kind of just want that music to kick in, which, by the way, the music is incredible, and just explore without constant non-stop combat. All that being said, I found personally that there was less combat than I was expecting, having seen other people's gameplay. For a while, it looked like there was going to be just enemies around every corner, but there were a couple of nice quiet sections that I did experience here playing on my own. Okay, well, I feel like this video is front-loaded with a lot of relatively negative first impressions, so I want to finish things off by talking about some of the stuff that I did enjoy. The co-op with friends does work really well. It was very easy to meet up with Joel, teleport to him, and play some together. You guys can expect probably some kind of episodic content with me and Joel playing the game in the future, and that part just worked really well. It was a little confusing to figure out how we could share quests, especially the ones that just involve getting a note and then finding a stash, for example, but we made it work. Exploring the world of Appalachia here in Fallout 76 was basically just as much fun as I was hoping with a friend, and that part really stood out as one of the highlights of my gameplay from last night.
You need to get out of that vault outfit. don't do that.
Wait for it. Confident. I'm a confident ranger.
That face. Go to hell. Oh.
It was great to not only fight enemies together, but try and explore new locations and find hidden secrets and work on a couple of side quests together. And it really was the cooperative Fallout experience that we've been wishing for a long time. Again, with the slight issue of whenever we saw a player coming down the road with their mic on while they're shooting at enemies, we just kind of wanted to avoid them and do our own thing. The multiplayer part just does seem like a throwaway for me. It's just not something that I'm interested in, running into other players. The world itself is also really awesomely detailed. There's been a slight lighting and visual upgrade to the game, and things are looking pretty good, with a couple of technical limitations along the way. The game has a lot of pop-in right now, including a very awkward shadow pop-in that seems like it's right in front of your character's face about 20 feet away at all times. There's also a very, very heavy blur to this game. This artificial depth of field to blur the background. I feel like Bethesda is really worried here about the background visuals not being up to par, so they've kind of hidden everything behind this smeary blur in the background. And that blur also feels like it starts maybe 15 feet away from you and gets really, really heavy. You have to aim down sights to be able to see things in the distance, and it's not really cinematic, it's just really distracting. Because of how much time was lost re-downloading the beta, we didn't have a lot of time to explore things very far away from the vault, so my impressions for the multiplayer and co-op elements here are really just in the initial starting areas. I'd also say that the West Virginia setting is almost as awesome as I was hoping. Things do seem a little bit crowded for a map as big as this is supposed to be, but I am very excited to spend some more time exploring these more unique locations and also just this Appalachian countryside. One final big improvement for me were the updates to the camp system, which is the equivalent of the Fallout 4 workshop mode. You guys know that that was one of the biggest pulls for me in Fallout 4. Something that I've been doing for years is building just ridiculously complex and detailed settlements. And for a vanilla workshop camp building mode here in Fallout 76, the improvements are pretty solid. Of course, the camps are going to be limited compared to what Fallout 4 could do. This is still a multiplayer game at its core, but they've made a lot of quality of life improvements to the building system. The organization is a lot better, and it's a lot easier to find recent items thanks to the recent item history. And with only 15 minutes left before the servers went down during the beta test last night, I was able to dive in with just a few bits of resources and build a cool little simple log tower on the back of this mountain. It was pretty simple, but it was very easy to build and quite intuitive. I think the biggest downside to the camp system is I won't be able to kind of go ham and go all in with the detailing and making it really my own settlement. A lot of these settlements are going to feel kind of cut and paste, but it'll be cool to see what other players come up with and to build my own to make my mark here on the Appalachian Wasteland. Okay guys, let's wind this down. Overall impressions. I'm honestly left a little bit befuddled. That's a word you don't hear very often, right? Befuddled? Hey, it's the first thing that came to mind, I guess. If I had to describe my feelings about the game, having played just the first 3 hours, I would say that it's not as bad as I was starting to worry it was going to be, but it's also not quite as good as I was hoping. It's just pretty good. And I think I'm going to need some more time to really understand what I'm looking at here. I also want to touch just briefly on the story elements because I think that could be a really strong point for this game. The story and the holotapes that you find appears to be very, very dark, and I love the fact that it's taking place relatively soon after the Great War. I think that's a great opportunity for some very dark and hard-hitting storytelling here in Appalachia. But again, the multiplayer elements are kind of a distraction from that. Trying to listen to a 3 or 4 minute holotape with enemies spawning in around you and trying to coordinate with your friends when you're hearing different things at different times and finding different notes and different loot, it's kind of a sensory overload, and it does take away from being able to appreciate what, again, I think might be a pretty dark and pretty interesting set of stories here in Appalachia. I can't speak too much to that though because I've only experienced just a small amount of the story as a whole. Just the setting alone and the ability to play with my friends will be enough to keep me going for a while. I definitely want to dive back in and see what this game has to offer, even if for now I remain a bit more skeptical than I was before. That's going to do it for now. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all next time.